to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show, and it is the first show of March 2025. Today is March 3rd. It's a Monday, and this is the A block, which means it's the start of the top of the hour. We start just after the top of the hour with news and stuff like that. And that is for reference for you people who are listening some point in time in the future, because we do this show live. It is a live radio show, 7 to 8 o'clock every single morning. We bring along this guy right here, John Combes. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Brad.
Hopefully you have a great weekend.
I did. How was yours? Did you get some work done at the transmitter site, you said?
Oh, we'll talk about that later, okay?
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I have in the B block, I have two interesting updates to pass along, which you may find, which when I give both of these updates, John will get a big chuckle out of both of the updates. One of them, he may be a little bit jealous, but he'll laugh at it. But okay, so we start the show off with John Combes' top three. Now, what's the top three? It's essentially pulled from his numerous entries he does every single day on johncombest.com, C-O-M-B-E-S-T, johncombest.com. He chronicles events and news items all over the state of Missouri, primarily that are politically or somehow interesting as far as the news is concerned, and puts it on his site. If you go to his site, you won't find all sorts of fancy graphics and videos and blinking things that blink at you and songs that start playing and stuff like that. It's really sort of like Internet 1.0, really basic, fast loading, and it just has a bunch of links. You can click on it. It takes you to the source. Could be a website for a TV station, a newspaper, a radio station. Could be a website for a candidate. Could even be a website for a government agency. We start with this guy. What's your name again, sir?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And we started off with...
In third place...
Follow up to a story that we brought to listeners 3 weeks ago. On February 10th, we covered this, and it's time for a follow-up now, because the Washington Missourian had a piece this weekend by a gentleman named Christopher Parker. The headline, State U.S. Lawmakers Back Landfill Cleanup Efforts. This is the story of a gentleman who bought some property outside of St. Clair and then quickly realized that he was right next to a toxic landfill. I should say an old toxic landfill. And back on February 10th, when we reported on the Missourians' report of this, we talked about the fact that there seemed to be a little bit of bureaucratic hot potato going on. This gentleman was not able, according to him, to get any satisfactory answers from the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. And in fact, at one point they said they were evaluating all toxic landfills and would expect to have a report within the next 2 or 3 years, which sounded pretty silly. But an update from Christopher Parker here at the Missourian. It turns out that DNR is looking at this topic. It also turns out that Senator Josh Hawley's office has been in contact with the Missouri Department of Natural Resources as well. The initial version of the story did point out that Hawley's office actually sent somebody from Hawley's staff out to this land to take a look at it and is following up. Now, the next piece of action that's coming up on this is coming up at the end of the month, at the end of March. The Franklin County Commission is getting together, and Mr. Roberts, who's the gentleman who purchased this plot of land, is going to speak before Franklin County Commission and ask them for some sort of action here. And Brad, as we talked about last time, the issue here, as Josh Hawley points out, is that Hawley's able to do a whole lot with Westlake and with Coldwater Creek, because that's really been a federal issue. But it's a little bit harder for Hawley to lean on folks that are just on the state level. He and his team are doing their best. But this is probably going to come down to being a state and county issue. And will they clean it up? And one more point here. The DNR, for their part, says that their biggest challenge has been finding somebody, what they call a, quote, viable property owner, unquote, to foot the bill for cleanup. And I guess that's not surprising, because if you buy an area that's a toxic landfill, the profit incentive of taking a ton of money, probably millions of dollars, and cleaning that up isn't very good. So who's going to want to inherit that property? I've rambled for too long about this, Brad. I guess the bottom line is this is really good journalism, I would say, from the Missourian, because you can tell that they're continuing to put the pressure on. And it looks like we're getting some action from Josh Hawley. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that the piece also quotes State Representative Brad Banderman from St. Clair, who talks about being in touch with DNR, and he says he's leaning on DNR. And Senator Ben Brown from Washington, who also represents the St. Clair area, says that his office is in touch with DNR. They know what's going on, and they're monitoring the situation too. So again, good shoe leather journalism here.
Now, a little bit more of clarification. Was this a landfill that was sanctioned by the county or one of the agencies, or is just somebody that the previous property owner dumped a bunch of stuff there and did it illegally?
It was officially sanctioned, and it was the one that was run by the Zyken family over a period of time.
So why, if it was officially sanctioned, wouldn't there be some kind of a flag on the property that when it got transferred, that it wouldn't, there would be, whoa, hold on a minute, we can't transfer this property because of the fact that, when it goes to the recorder of deeds office, because this was a landfill. Wouldn't that come up, don't you think? No?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And as we talked about on February 10th in the original Washington Missourian story, the woman who purchased the property is a veteran. I guess you could describe her as a veteran real estate gal. She says she's purchased a lot of properties in the past, and that there wasn't anything on the documents to suggest that there was any sort of presence of toxic material. Franklin County, on the other hand, says that, I guess they produced to the reporter a document that showed that there was a simple tag on it that said something to the effect of caution, former landfill. But it didn't mention anything, according to the Missourian first report, it didn't mention anything about the toxic nature of the landfill. You see what I'm saying? So the woman says, hey, it said it was a landfill. It didn't say there were bad stuff there. Franklin County's like, look, we told you it was a landfill. What more do you want from us?
Well, I don't know. I have to tell you that if it did say caution landfill, I mean, I would say, if it were me buying the property, I would go like, okay, what kind of landfill? There's what they call, I don't know if you know, I know a little bit about this. There's what they call a C&D landfill. You know what a C&D landfill is?
Something and dump, clear and destruct.
Well, construction and demolition landfills. In other words, it's not supposed to have any organic matter in it. It's like, if you tear down a house and it's like, it would be like concrete block and, stuff like that. It's not supposed to have any food waste or any kind of,
I see. Okay, that's unique.
Yeah, and they have different classifications of landfill. I would think if she's a seasoned real estate person and she saw landfill, there would be a little bit of, on her end saying like, okay, exactly what was dumped here, because I would think if it were sanctioned by the county, there would be a permit she could pull and essentially say, oh my God, this was like they dumped batteries here or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think Franklin County's point in that original article was like, they couldn't say this, but reading between the lines, they were like, look, lady, you should have known. We told you it was a landfill. You should have done your due diligence. And she's like, the way I read it was, she's like, I didn't know it was that type of landfill.
Well, can I also make a comment, which, and I don't mean to, when you called her a seasoned real estate.
Yeah.
I have dealt with seasoned real estate people who I don't think they would know which end of the of the car was the front and the back. You know what I'm saying?
Well, if it's like a Lamborghini, the trunk could be in the front, right?
Yeah, that is the case. Okay, time to move on to number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
Brad, I'm going to ask you an intensely personal question that I know the answer to, but I kind of want to hear you verbalize it. To paraphrase Kip from the Oscar-winning film Napoleon Dynamite, did your mom go to college?
She did.
Yeah, and where did she go to college, Brad? Just for point of fact.
Washington University, same place you went.
What a school. What a team. What a ride. Brad, I knew the answer to that question. But your mom's college history, and everyone's mom's college history who went to college, was the subject of an inspirational talk on Saturday. At the Boone County Courthouse in Columbia, Missouri, there was a big pride rally. And the pride rally drew about 100 plus people. This story is brought to us, by the way, in the Columbia Missourian by a gentleman named Fletcher Mantooth. You know his little nephew, Fletcher Womanjaw. Fletcher Mantooth brings us this story. And there was a gentleman who spoke there who is a guy who's, I guess, a cross-dresser. And his stage name, I'm guessing it's his stage name, is Verity Tatum. And he was talking about all the gay heroes and transgender heroes and queer heroes in history that we're fighting for. And he named specifically, Brad, Abraham Lincoln's, I guess, according to this gentleman, Abraham Lincoln had a same-sex thing going on with a guy named Joshua Fry Speed. And this guy named Mr. Tatum lists a number of other gay heroes, but specifically, Brad, he wanted you to know that he is fighting for, quote, your mother's collegiate menage a trois. Now, Brad, I don't mean to besmirch Mrs. Hildebrand, but I think it's kind of a pushing it, kind of a stretch for Mr. Tatum to say that your mom was engaged in some sort of risque behavior in Washington University back in the day. Don't you think?
It's very interesting. My mom used to talk about this all the time, and it's interesting because if you look at the current college statistics of male versus female, back in the day, I think my mom said it was like 70% men and 30% women, and of that 30% that were the women, there were quite a few of them that were there to get their MRS degree.
Exactly.
They were there essentially to find a husband. And now the current college statistics, I think overall are like 60-40 female, which is sort of interesting how that's changed.
Yeah. And if you go to WashU, by the way, just speaking from experience, if you're a heterosexual white Christian male and you're not Asian and you're not Jewish, you pretty much have a lock on the white women. That's just what a guy that graduated 25 years ago did.
Well, once again, I think my parents said that back in the day, I think it was 80% of the people that went to WashU were locals within the St. Louis metro area, and I think it's like 10% now or something like that?
Yeah, it's a very small number. I just thought it was unique in all the stories of the Columbia protests that you would have a gentleman who's a cross-dresser come up and not only suggest that Abe Lincoln played for the other team, but also suggest that everyone's mom. Now, in fairness, he didn't say that everyone's mom did that, thing. But, maybe I'm just seeing this the wrong way. Maybe he's just being more open-minded than I am.
Doesn't it frustrate you that you have these people that make these broad statements about things that they really know nothing about to prove a point? You know what I'm saying?
I think so.
To prove their point.
So. I mean, it's probably a little bit of a stretch to say that Abe Lincoln was gay, but who knows? I don't know. Now, I'm not an Abe Lincoln scholar.
Is this guy any relation to Randolph Mantooth?
Oh, the reporter?
No.
Who is Randolph Mantooth? I don't know.
Oh, my God, John. You don't know who Randolph Mantooth is?
I don't know. Who is Randolph Mantooth?
John, if you had a friend who was a paramedic, or a firefighter, if you mentioned the name Randolph Mantooth, they would say, oh, my God, Randolph Mantooth, we worship him.
What did he invent some sort of procedure or something?
He was one of the two actors on the Emergency series.
Never heard of it.
You don't know Emergency?
No.
Do you need to be schooled on this?
I was born in 1977.
This show is still in syndication. Emergency, and that was what it was called, just Emergency with a asterisk, was a show that followed two, at the time, unknown people because of the fact that they were paramedics.
You mean ER? Do you mean George Clooney in the show ER?
No. This was the basis on this show was they were a part of they drove around in a Dodge, which has become a collector's item if you have one of these from way back when. They drove around in a Dodge cabin chassis truck, and they were a rescue unit that was attached to Squad 51 in Los Angeles. And what this showed was, and it's interesting, to this day.
All right, let's go. We got 4 minutes. Go ahead.
To this day, if you mention Randolph Mantooth to anybody who's probably over the age of 30, and I'm not even saying a youngster, even the young guys, paramedics, will essentially say, oh my God, they changed everything. Because what they did was they chronicled the fact that these two guys were paramedics. This is back in the 70s, and they worked with a fire department, and they were not an ambulance. They were a paramedic. They had a truck that was like a work body truck.
Oh,
and
wow. What was the chassis like, Brad?
Oh, it was a cabin chassis, John. It was
Okay, thank you. We hadn't covered that yet.
It was
Go
a
ahead.
1-ton Dodge with a work body on the back, and they arrived on the scene of accidents, and they would stabilize the patient and put in an IV, and then they would talk on a two-way to the doctors in the ER at Rampart Hospital, and they would give them instructions to give them Ringer's lactate, and then the ambulance guys would get there and transport them, and then they would essentially go to the hospital to check on them to make sure they made it okay. See,
Now, is Ringer's lactate, would you get over the mail for the whole, issue you're having?
Ringers, Ringers, Ringers
Oh,
lactate.
I thought you meant riggers, like make something hard.
No.
You know what's not hard?
Is-
Renaming things in the state of Missouri for story number one.
The number one.
A story that might get Brad Hildebrand to rethink his position on renaming roads, bridges, other things for politicians. For folks who are joining us for the very first time today, welcome. We do the show Monday through Friday, 7 to 8 a.m. local time. Brad, for folks who haven't heard this before, could you tell us your position on naming roads, bridges, monuments after living politicians?
Well, even if they're dead politicians, I'm against it. I'm for what they're now doing, putting signs up on the interstate that give the names of various service members, Marines, Navy, Air Force, Army, whatever, who gave their life for our country. And I think the fact that naming something, I don't care if it's a park, I don't care if it's a bridge, as a road, should never be named after politicians. That's my view on it.
Okay, and that's a well-established position by you. You've had that for a long time, Brad, and I respect that. I disagree, but I respect that. There's something that might change your mind. There's several bills in the state legislature sponsored by a gentleman named Scott Cupps. Now, he's from Shell Knob, Missouri. That's down by Table Rock Lake. And here's the backstory real quick, Brad. I should point out the story is brought to us by Jake Kroesen from the Missouri Times, which just posted overnight. Mr. Cupps, Representative Cupps, was one of the folks who was being considered to be the vice chair of the House Budget Committee. It's a powerful position. Rep. Dirk Deaton is chairman of it, and vice chair is an important position. But Speaker John Patterson chose somebody else. He chose a guy named Bishop Davidson. And reading between the lines here, it looks like Scott Cupps wasn't so happy about it and wanted to have a little fun with it. Maybe wanted to pay tribute to Representative Bishop Davidson. So these bills from Representative Cupps, which he just filed, I believe, on Friday, which was the last day to file bills, would rename many things in the state of Missouri after his quasi-friend, maybe frenemy, Bishop Davidson. Every bridge in the state of Missouri would be renamed the Bishop Davidson Bridge. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education would be renamed the Bishop Davidson Curriculum Distribution Department. Tom Sauk Mountain would be renamed Bishop Davidson Summit. Katy Trail would be Bishop Davidson Trail. And the Missouri State Fair would be known as the Bishop Davidson Fair. Now, I think this is pretty funny, Brad. Has this changed you maybe just a little bit? If you were able to name, like you were a state rep, and you were able to go in and say, rename every state bridge after somebody in the radio industry who drove you nuts, wouldn't you take that opportunity, Brad? Come on, be honest.
Well, first off, I think it's nothing against the guy's name, but it almost sounds like you're naming it after Catholic bishops. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, we can't have any Christianity in government.
Right.
Our government was not founded by white Christian men at all. We can't have anything like that.
Right. They were all Jewish from Israel, which before Israel was even a country. I would just change it to Scott Dickhouse. That would I do. I would just change it to Scott Dickhouse.
Oh, yeah, Scott's a great guy.
Yeah.
You know what? We had a conversation about you last year. He's got a lot of love for Brad Hildebrand.
Yes.
Anyway, the point is, I think this is awesome. By all accounts, and what I'd point out real quick is that Jake did a good job. Jake brought this in a very even-handed way. He's clearly not taking sides here. And it seems like Scott Cupps has a good sense of humor.
So what does Mr. Bishop think about her? Bishop?
That's what I want to hear this week. That's what I want to hear. Both Scott and Bishop come out and say, hey, is this a fun little thing? Is there a little bit of heat here? You know, the old cliche, there's truth in every joke. I want to hear both sides of it. It's a little bit of levity in a rather mundane legislative session.
Okay, that is John Combett's top three.